June 2026 is what I would call a bridge month, one with some genuinely lovely astrology. It'll be setting the stage for July, when I think things are going to get a bit crazy again. But before we get into this month's forecast, we're going to review the events of May and the astrology that signified them. On May the 8th, the Trump administration started its release of UFO files through the Department of War. That file release came just over a week after a full moon in Mars's nocturnal sign of Scorpio, tightly square to Pluto, which promised the release of secrets. If you want to know more on this subject, then check out this video on the channel, which I released last week. Now, on May the 16th, we saw a new moon in the sign of Taurus, which was tightly conjunct the dwarf planet Ceres, and more distantly, the messenger planet Mercury. Ceres is named for the goddess of the harvest, and it tends to bring up the theme of nourishment, agriculture, and food. That new moon coincided with a rash of media reports about a global fertilizer crisis resulting from the disruption of trade through the Strait of Hormuz. Unfortunately, the coincidence of this issue with this new moon suggests it's something that's just getting going, and it seems likely that it will get a lot worse before it gets better. If you have more than you need and are looking for ways to deploy your resources to do good in the world, then donating to charities or organizations that help people to farm or to eat in poorer parts of the world might be the way to go right now. Now, the same Taurus new moon also saw the declaration by the World Health Organization that an outbreak of Ebola virus in Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda is of international concern. That new moon was also conjunct the fixed star Algol, which is often associated with horrific events on the ground. And if you know a little about Ebola, well, that will all make sense to you. And speaking of infectious disease, recent weeks have also seen a panic about an outbreak of Hantavirus aboard a cruise ship to Antarctica, which killed 3 people. The theory now is that a passenger caught the virus in Ushuaia, Argentina, before getting on the boat. There have been quite a lot of fears that this was going to turn into a new COVID-style pandemic, but it doesn't seem to be happening, thankfully. We're still in the territory of the Saturn-Pluto sextile, which echoes back to the 2020 pandemic that came at their conjunction. I think people can feel that, and they're jumpy about us repeating the same story. Now, I could be wrong, but I can't see a new COVID-style pandemic happening at this time. I just think we're seeing echoes of it in the form of the restrictions and rules that have been applied in certain places due to the ongoing energy crisis and the fears people have that it's all happening again. I don't think it is. All right, let's get into June. If you're enjoying the video so far, then please do like the video and hit subscribe to make sure that the algorithm knows you like this content. Thanks. Let's set the scene for where we'll be as June begins. We'll have just seen a full moon in Sagittarius on May the 31st, which will be coloring the first half of the month. I talked about this lunation in my May forecast, but as a recap, this is a lunation in fiery, adventurous Sagittarius, and it will be emphasizing themes like foreign affairs, travel and trade, law, education, and publishing, to mention the quest for truth. And there is something interesting happening within the 2-week period governed by this full moon that I'm already aware of, and that's the release on June the 12th of Steven Spielberg's new film, Disclosure Day. Sagittarius is the sign of the preacher. It has to do with faith and belief, and like an archer, it points the way. And it seems to me that that's what this film is aimed at doing with regards to the UFO phenomenon. Spielberg has long played a role in shaping public perceptions about UFOs. Think E.T., Close Encounters in Third Kind, War of the Worlds. Now he's stepping in once again to do the same thing in June, at a time when the Trump administration is releasing UFO files and videos. That's probably not a coincidence. And it's something I explored in more depth in my video on UFO disclosure if you haven't already seen it. You might want to watch it after this, if not. Now, the astrological weather of June is probably going to be a bit more volatile than it might first appear. And that's down to one planet in particular, and that planet is Uranus, the planet of radical change, rebellion, sudden shocks and disruptions, invention, and technology. On April the 26th, Uranus moved into Gemini, from which it's going to bring a lot of new ideas, inspiration and invention, particularly in the mercurial realms of information technology, trade, communications, and transport. But in June, Uranus is going to be forming a square with the lunar nodes. Any planet that's conjunct or square the nodes is more active and volatile than usual. Incidentally, there are two calculations for the nodes, the mean and true positions. I prefer the true node position, and by that calculation, Uranus will be exactly square the nodes on June the 12th, but by the mean node, it will be in that position on June the 20th. I think this extra dose of Uranian energy will be in play over the course of the month. Essentially, we have a jacked up, extra energetic Uranus here. This is a little like giving someone who's in the middle of a manic episode a puff on your crack pipe. Now, positively speaking, this could bring some genuinely significant announcements about new inventions and technologies, and we can probably expect this to manifest in some parts of the world as unrest, protests, rebellions, and unfortunately, I think there's a higher chance than usual of natural disasters at this time. Given that Uranus will be in the air sign of Gemini, we might expect disturbances of the air. Here are Uranus's geodetic positions by midheaven and ascendant. You can see that by midheaven, it's right over the Indian Ocean, and by ascendant, it's over the Atlantic Ocean. So that doesn't bode well for the Atlantic hurricane season or the Northern Indian Ocean cyclone season, both of which will be beginning right around now. What's more, Uranus is currently conjunct the very slow-moving dwarf planet Sedna, which is named for an Inuit goddess of the oceans. I think we might see natural disasters in late May or June that relate to the ocean. I hope I'm wrong here, but I have done some research into Uranus's conjunctions with Sedna and its squares to the nodes, and that research suggests something like this could be on the cards. In the bonus section of the video for channel members, I outline that research. All right, let's push on, because besides the Uranian volatility, there's actually some very lovely astrology coming in June. On June the 9th, Venus and Jupiter will form an exact conjunction at 25 degrees of Cancer and 46 minutes. This energy will be building through the first week of June, and it will be in play at least until Venus leaves Cancer for Leo on June the 13th. The conjunction of Venus and Jupiter is the sweetest planetary combination in astrology because these are the two benefic planets which support life and whose gifts are characterized by ease and pleasure. Venus is the planet of unity between disparate elements. It represents the forces that attract people to one another. So it represents love, pleasure, beauty, and wealth. Jupiter is similarly beneficial, but it operates at a grander scale. If Venus is about connection between individuals and among small groups, then Jupiter brings connection to forces and collectives that are far greater than we are as individuals. It brings us into coherence with one another, and it expands whatever it touches. Put Venus and Jupiter together and we have a recipe for fortune, ease, and goodwill in large quantities. Now, the conjunction is taking place in the third decan of Cancer. If Cancer is the sign of care, nurture, and protection within bounded spaces of identity, then that third decan is about going beyond the basics and enjoying the finer things in life, whether that's physical luxuries or luxuries of the mind, like the arts and philosophy. And so this Venus-Jupiter conjunction represents an opportunity to spread the love, to gather together with those you cherish, and to enjoy whatever's sweetest to you. Just be careful not to overdo it, whether that's on food or drink or whatever else, because that could be something of a danger here. Don't be greedy, although if there were ever a moment for greed, it would be here. The conjunction is taking place very close to Mercury in the United States' Sibly chart. I'd suggest that this period of early June, say June the 5th to 14th, could bring breakthroughs relating to mercurial matters for the US, including foreign trade and investment, communication and transport. The US President Donald Trump will probably be in a very good mood around the time of this conjunction, as it will be right on his Venus at 25 Cancer. I could see him announcing some kind of huge trade deal around this time and celebrating somehow. Sorry, Trump haters, I've got nothing for you here. All right, let's keep pushing through June. From a US perspective, this month will start to get very interesting once the Gemini new moon hits. On June the 15th, we get a new moon at 24 degrees of Gemini, so we're getting a seed moment here in the curious, talkative realm of the twins. On the surface of things, this lunation isn't making any close aspects with other planets, so it's going to give us a relatively pure expression of Gemini energy, although there is going to be a martial flavor here too. The ruler of the lunation is Mercury, making a sextile with the war planet Mars. Clever military action might be on the cards. And the lunation itself is happening pretty close to the midpoint of Jupiter and Mars, which is a crusading, campaigning, aggressive kind of energy. And when we consider the mundane sphere, this lunation becomes really interesting. The new moon will govern the month from mid-June to mid-July. Now, on the one hand, if we cast the chart for this lunation in Washington, D.C., to see what it promises for the US, there are a couple of strong signatures, and they seem to be saying somewhat contradictory things. For one thing, Venus will be right on the descendant, the point relating to allies and open enemies, but it's in an opposition with deep and dirty Pluto. I'd read that as saying that the US will be pursuing intense peace negotiations over the course of this month. But Mars is in Taurus right on the IC of this chart. This is the point that speaks to the homeland and infrastructure and farmland and the political opposition. A debilitated Mars, as it is in Taurus, on the IC is something of an ill omen. It could represent the potential for dissatisfaction among the ordinary people, infrastructure problems, accidents, drought, fires. Given this is Taurus, sign of the harvest, we might wonder if there'll be issues related to land or food. What's more, this new moon is landing close to the Mars placement at 21 Gemini in the US Sibley chart. That could be saying that the US is going to be taking more aggressive military or foreign affairs action sometime between mid-June and mid-July. What's more, this same lunation is happening just a little over a degree from Trump's sun, marking this as a particularly significant month for Donald Trump. Now, in that new moon chart, Mars is right on the midheaven of Trump's chart, which again could be suggesting that he'll be taking some kind of martial action. In particular, I'll be looking to the end of June or early July for when this could manifest. On June the 20th, Mars reaches Trump's 24 Taurus midheaven. Then it squares his natal Mars in Leo, and on June the 28th, it squares his 29 Leo ascendant. Once Mars ingresses into Gemini on June the 28th, it forms a conjunction with Uranus. This is a volatile conjunction that we'll talk about more in next month's forecast. And here I'd like to recommend the video I made earlier this year with Wade Caves on the prospects for US relations with Cuba. Wade thinks there's a strong risk of the US taking some kind of aggressive action this year and possibly around that Mars-Uranus conjunction. If we look at the 2026 Aries ingress for Cuba, we can see that it has Uranus right on the ascendant at 28 Taurus. That will be triggered by Mars around June the 26th. Remember that Uranus is jacked up and square the nose this month, so we can expect to see more sudden and surprising action. We've seen that from the Trump administration more than once so far this year, and I don't think it's done yet trying to reshape the global order. All right, let's keep moving and talk about the astrology of the summer solstice. On June the 21st comes the summer solstice, which is one of the most symbolically potent moments of the year. Astrologically speaking, this is the moment that the sun enters the tropical sign of Cancer. If we cast a chart for that moment, we get a chart for the second quarter of the year, following the quarter that began with the Aries ingress in March. Now, I've cast the ingress chart here without the angles, with Aries rising. This chart is going to give us a broad flavor of major themes around the world, running from the solstice until the Libra equinox in late October. And what draws my eye here is the conjunction of Mercury and Jupiter in Cancer. Both these planets are concerned with knowledge, even if they have quite different ways of gathering it. Their conjunction indicates great learning, knowledge, and wisdom. And they're meeting in Cancer, a cardinal sign. The phrase forming in my head here is new knowledge. I think this quarter of the year is going to bring some highly significant discoveries and announcements. And something else that strikes me about this conjunction is that it's being squared by Saturn in Aries. I read that as saying that the knowledge in question will be subject to criticism and denial. Now, what could this be about? Well, many things, of course, because this is a chart applying across the world. But there is one specific event that I have in mind here, and it has to do with this man, Filippo Biondi of the Khafre project, which last year caused a massive stir by claiming to have used satellite radar technology to infer the presence of massive structures extending deep beneath the pyramids of Giza. Since then, Biondi has announced that he's used the same technology to identify another incredible finding, a second Sphinx. And he's going to be presenting his findings for the first time on the day of the solstice, June the 21st, at a conference in Bologna, Italy. Needless to say, these claims have been subject to a huge amount of skepticism from mainstream archaeological sources. But Biondi has said on X that he is now, quote, 100% certain that this second Sphinx really does exist. So he's staked his entire reputation on this. Now, all I can do from my end is consider the astrological weather. And as we've seen, the day of the solstice, we have a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer, which very much looks to me like the harvesting of significant new knowledge over this quarter of the year. And as I've said on the channel before, the August Leo eclipse is triggering the charts of many of the greatest spiritual teachers of the 19th and 20th century, and it'll be coming into effect already in June. What's more, Uranus, planet of sudden revelations, is now in Gemini, the sign of the twins. What could fit Uranus and Gemini better than the discovery of a second Sphinx, as shown on the Chariot card of the Tarot? Now, on June the 28th, Mars moves into Gemini, where it closes in on a conjunction with Uranus. We'll cover this configuration in next month's forecast, but it's worth bearing in mind that these are typically volatile and explosive conjunctions. I think world events are going to heat up a lot at the end of June. Now, let's move to the second lunation of June, a full moon in Capricorn. On June the 29th, we get a full moon at 8 degrees of Capricorn. This is a culmination, revelation, or turning point in Saturn's sign of worldly systems, institutions, and big business. In terms of the influences on this lunation, it's taking place in a broad square to its ruler Saturn and foggy Neptune in Aries. Saturn's conjunction with Neptune has brought a dissolution, or at least a destabilizing of structures that we thought we could rely upon. There's a tendency with Saturn-Neptune to compare reality, Saturn, with our ideals, Neptune, and to find it lacking. In other words, it's a time of disillusion. That can feel a bit depressing, but if we're to enter into a more realistic and therefore productive relationship with the world, those themes may be highlighted by this Capricorn lunation. Generally speaking, there'll be a strong Saturnine influence, so expect it to bring reality checks, blocks, and notifications to slow down or recalibrate. At a mundane level, this lunation is governing the 2 weeks of the first half of July. If we look at the astro map, we can see that it'll be right on the midheaven in Western Europe and Northwest Africa. And what's more, Saturn will be rising in some of these places at the same time. So I can see that this full moon and the fortnight it leads will bringing scandal and disrepute for governments in places like the UK, Spain, France. People won't be happy and they'll be making their feelings clear. All right, that's almost it for this video. But before we go, there's one last big shift in June that we have to talk about, and that's the transition of Jupiter from Cancer to Leo. On June the 30th, Jupiter moves into Leo after having spent about 1 year in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer has brought growth and expansion to the realms of care, nurture, growth, and belonging. Jupiter can be quite subtle in its operations in the mundane sphere, but I'd suggest it's kindled a rise in tribalism and our identification with particular families or groups or clans. Now it's time for Jupiter to turn its attentions to the Leonine realm, where it will be until it heads into Virgo on July the 26th, 2027. Jupiter was happy in Cancer, but it's also quite happy in Leo, which is a fire sign that Jupiter rules by triplicity. With Leo, we have the sun sign of visibility, authenticity, centrality, and the inner child. It's a sign that seeks to be seen, celebrated, and remembered. And so, all other things being equal, Jupiter in Leo is going to bring more opportunities for self-expression, for creativity, for leadership. And it will bring a sizable boost to Leo placements, lending them an extra dose of confidence and optimism. What's especially nice about Jupiter's Leo transit is that it will no longer be squared by Saturn by sign. Jupiter's transit through Cancer was a little less exuberant than it could have been because Saturn was squaring that sign from Aries and putting the brakes on the growth that Jupiter likes to drive. That's not going to be true for Jupiter's Leo transit. Saturn will be trining Leo from Aries by sign, so Saturn will be injecting a supportive dose of realism into our creative leonine efforts. The only hard outer planet aspect Jupiter will make, in which some caution needs to be taken about, is its opposition to Pluto on July the 20th, which we'll cover in next month's forecast. Now, in the Northern Hemisphere, the Sun is in Leo during a part of the year in which light is dominant over darkness, but steadily losing ground each day. Thus, Leo has the sense of trying to hold on to the limelight, to preserve its time in the Sun, and so to be remembered. And something I've noticed about Jupiter's transits through Leo is that they seem to bring iconic images of leadership. Now, in what I'm about to say, put aside your feelings about whether these leaders were quote unquote good or bad. Just think in terms of how memorable and central the leaders were at that time. When Jupiter was in Leo the last time, between 16th of July 2014 and 11th of August 2015, we got used to seeing images and video of this guy, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, running the ISIS caliphate from Mosul in Iraq. The time before that, Jupiter was in Leo between August the 1st, 2002 and August the 27th, 2003 during the Iraq War. At this time came George W. Bush's infamous Mission Accomplished photo shoot, which came a few months after the equally iconic images Saddam Hussein's statue being pulled down in Baghdad in April 2003. Jupiter was in Leo between August the 18th of 1990 and September the 12th of 91, at the time of the fall of the USSR. That episode produced this iconic image of Russian President Boris Yeltsin standing on a tank and rallying opposition to a coup. And here's one more from February the 1st of 1979, when Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini made his return to Iran on an Air France flight and descended to the tarmac in Tehran during the Iranian Revolution. Again, forget about whether you like these figures. The point is that Jupiter in Leo injects energy into the position of the leader. With Jupiter running through Donald Trump's first house and Trump being Trump, I do wonder if this year-long transit will furnish us with some kind of iconic image of Trump that will serve to define his presidency. Anyway, if you're in a business that involves projecting your image in some way, consider using Jupiter's year-long transit through Leo to revamp and project your image onto the world anew. It's certainly going to be supported at this time. All right, that's it for this month's forecast. In the bonus section of the video, available for members of the channel here on YouTube or at my website, worldastrologyreport.com, we examine some historical astrology, and we see how Uranus's conjunctions with Sedna and its squares with the nodes have tended in the past to coincide with natural disasters, among other things. Thanks for watching, and see you again on the channel very soon.